listening to eTalkRadio. This is Black Experiences in Corporate America. I am Brooklyn, your host for the hour. Joining me today, I am pleased to have Akitha Calloway, who may sound familiar to some listeners as she is a co-host on other shows on this platform. Akitha, in her other life, was an HR representative in the southern part of the United States. In this program, she is sharing her experiences as a Black woman in corporate America in the area of human resources. Throughout her career, she has gained nuggets of knowledge that offer some much needed insight into how to navigate the often murky waters of the corporate landscape in America. Akitha, welcome to the other side of the interview table.
Wow, thank you for inviting me, Brooklyn. I appreciate it. I'm looking forward to having this conversation.
Glad to have you. Let's start with where you attended school. What area of study led you toward the field of human resources?
Well, when I was in college, the work study program that I was working in placed me in the HR department. There, I saw different stages of Black women in charge, running meetings, creating an HR team. Now, at this time, human resources was just like the holiday calendar, benefits, and just, everything on the outskirts of it. But it seems that I had a calling for benefits, new hires, employee relations, culture building. But back then, they only had business school with no human resource study at all. So I received my bachelor's in business and then obtained my master's in human resources when they finally incorporated into the School of Business.
Interesting. How long were you in the human resources field?
Oh, about 10 years. I was in there for about 10 years.
It's a long time. Many experiences come like with that length of time. Have you always lived and worked in the southern part of the United States?
Yes, I have. I've worked, raised my children, lived all in the deep south.
Do you think that there are certain experiences or aspects to the corporate HR field that are different depending on what area of the country you reside in, or even what area of certain states in which you reside?
Yes. When I worked in HR a little over 10 years, uh, there was just a different culture depending on the city, the state, the zip code that you were in. Because certain states, well, all states are at will with expectations, but some of the states are just they're at will and they do not allow expectations. So this is an interpretation where they feel that they can terminate an employee without any reason at any time, be it illegal or it could be a legal liability to the company. So it gives the leadership team a false sense of entitlement about controlling an individual's employment. Being that HR business partner in those states, you need to have the capability to balance the law, company policy, business and employee relationships in order to be a functioning HR team.
I think that's really interesting to note because it will let listeners know that even within the same organization, private companies, as long as you're in a different area of the country, you will be subjected to local laws first and not necessarily the rules of the organization.
Correct.
So, being in the South, how do you maneuver your beliefs and keep your composure and professionalism as a Black woman when faced with what is basically the company's good old boy network?
Oh, okay. This can be difficult because it's not only the good old boy network, it's the good old girl network too. Because as working in the South, white men and white women can be treacherous. And some Black women who feel that they have made it to the table can also have that mentality of being equal. So it's a difficult transition and you have to keep your wits about it. In reality, as a Black woman at the corporate table, you're utilized as a tool, not too much as an equal, and you can mistake this for power and a balance of the playing field. I had to understand my role and try to keep myself grounded no matter what the job function was. And in keeping grounded, I understood that when we interviewed, dealt with employee relations, or even in meetings with white people, I assumed that they feel that they are more knowledgeable at that table, and where I'm just there as a prop. Um, so I had to go in as a partner up front, that mask. And but my end goal was always in mind to assure that we as a people was treated equally or fairly. Um, if let's just say I was interviewing, we were on an interview panel, and there are different races, and I never go in, oh, we're going in and I'm putting everything on Black. You have to balance that perspective of who's the best fit for the team, for the company, who can do the job. But in interviewing candidates, they may, looking at that Black person, they may not have the capability of that job there, but do they have the capability of learning that job? And if the answer is yes, I would cultivate a conversation with the panel to see the pros and cons. Because what I have seen is that white people will give their own the benefit of the doubt. They could be undereducated, they can be the spouse's cousin, son of the manager who's coming in, and they want to give them a leg up, and they turn a blind eye to mediocrity. So now, knowing this, I was relentless in creating a playing field for ourselves. And in doing that, that's how I went into interviews and interviewing and meetings.
While it should be standard, it's really admirable that you would want to do that because, as we all know, diversity and inclusion does not necessarily mean having a really strong and powerful voice at the table, one that is allowed to be included fully in the decision making process.
Absolutely. And in doing that, a lot of Black women, Black men feel that when they finally make it to the table, that they have some form of power. In reality, it's just they left the door open a little bit, and most of us are afraid to kick it wide open. And that's what we have to start doing.
Exactly. So, in your opinion, what characteristics or personality traits could make someone an effective HR business partner?
You have to understand state and federal law. You have to know the company policy. And a lot of us, and I've sat in on meetings and dealt with different HR business partners, we have to have that emotional intelligence where you can understand how, or have more empathy and understand the perspectives of all parties. There is something in being in a role that you can be a part of all aspects of the company. Being an effective HR business partner, you have to look at the finance part of it to see how you're reading budgets, how the turnover can impact it, the employee head count, and the cost of benefits. And also in the budget and finance, you're dealing with toxic leadership that bleeds into bad culture that can lead to an increase in write-ups, and again, lean into high turnover. That hits the budget harder because it costs more to have somebody quit than to keep them on board. You have to be able to be an HR business partner, and you have to understand that you not only are part of the birthday committee, you're a part of budget, finance, payroll, operations. And those who go in there with that silo that they only have to worry about benefits and new employee orientation, they get caught up into just HR and not the company's mission statement. Those who are driven only by policy in this world is they only see black and white, and you miss the human concept. But if you just focus on the people and you just want to make everybody happy about birthdays and announcements and giveaways, you're not the resource of the company. So in order to be a human resource business partner, You have to be a well-rounded business person.
In being a well rounded partner, you mentioned that people should be emotionally intelligent. The
Yes.
tone of the company comes down from the top, whether it's the very top of the organization or the top of the department itself. So if someone is neither emotionally intelligent nor empathetic by nature, is that something they can be trained to be in order to be a good HR partner?
The only way that I feel that you can be trained to be emotionally intelligent or empathetic to the cause is that you're open to and willing to learn new concepts. There are too many of us that make it to lead HR generalist, HR supervisor, HR manager, vice president of HR, CHRO, and you look more at the bottom line of the finance budget than you look at the whole concept of being a partner. And if you're not willing to learn or open to realize that, you know what, I don't know everything, then you not only hurt yourself, but you hurt your customers.
Fully understandable. I can see how that would get in the way. So, based on that, do you see any barriers to reaching other positions in the corporate world if you decide to use HR as a starting point to move to other positions?
Well, through my career, um, as an HR representative, the only barrier that I faced was my name, being Aretha Calloway, my gender, and the way I speak because I'm from the South and not the rural area, but more urban. Those who see me and hear me for genuinely what I'm there for will always take me as an asset. And I've learned that through my career through HR. I had a mentor in this prior life who was awesome. I've always had women of color as mentors, but this white man, and I was surprised as you were, um, automatically made me a part of the leadership team. He placed me in meetings. I conducted reports that were out of my comfort zone. When we spoke about how he felt about the HR perspective in my career, the way that because I was well rounded, as we discussed earlier, he felt that not only I can lead the HR team, but I can step into a CEO or COO role. When I started there were only five white people and three blacks on the leadership team. With my guidance, we acquired seven black leadership personnel and only two whites. Unfortunately, he was forced to retire, and his replacement, a white woman, by her second day, everything that I've contributed and accomplished, she just wanted me to slot her appointments and make her coffee for the next morning. So shortly after, I found a better life and another career perspective that I realized that, maybe being in corporate America was not for me. But the barriers and reaching other positions, again, it depends on if you're willing to learn. Like I sat in on budget meetings, I sat in on culture surveys, I sat in on new trainings for new employees or even new trainings for different departments to understand what my customer was going through. If they had new customer service agents coming on, if they had new physicians coming on, it was always a perspective of learning that job function, not per se in doing it, but understanding the stress level that could happen. Or if someone is receiving a employee relation issue or write up, you need to understand or comprehend where their misstep was, or could it have been their supervisor misstep in not leading instead of just managing. So you have to be open to grow.
You mentioned a couple of things. First,
Okay.
you must have heard a little bit of surprise coming from my side of the table because you mentioned that you had women of color of mentors and a very different white man who became a mentor to you.
Yes.
So, yes, I was surprised. Having said that, given that his replacement was able to so quickly undo what he did, do you think that human resources needs more active roles in policy creation all the way up to the C suite level so that when positive changes take place, they can't be undone by the next person in the role?
Well, with that, and some of us are in that C suite with the CHRO level, it gets to the point where, again, being a Black woman, no matter how high up I went, if my if the predecessor of my boss, or if I'm not the boss, felt that Akeitha Calloway was just too ethnic and I can't go by Key for initiating my name, then then he or she didn't like the fact that I was there or that I was being difficult. And yes, I feel that real HR business partners, authentic, uh, educated, emotionally and mentally, should be in those roles. But too many times they let the HR hardcore business partners who are Black women or Black men or in that role, we can't climb because we kick the doors open on everything that's not right. So they will always have a white man or white woman in that role, or a Black man or Black woman in that role that's willing to turn a blind eye to being that balance. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does. And it actually segues into my next question, which
Awesome.
is, does it appear to you that there may be an over representation of Black women in human resources in the corporate world? And if so, do you feel that there is an intention behind it that may not be solely to increase diversity and inclusion?
I in my past life, Black women were in the HR field a lot. Like I said, it triggered me from college that I saw this dynamic. But in my past life, I've also saw Black women in different roles. But to say that it's only HR, not so much. But what I can say is that we will never be in the C suites unless we're willing to turn a blind eye. And when I say C suite, I mean CEO, COO, CFO. We will always be like the budget manager or even a VP. But to get to that tippy top in this world, there's some things that you will have to give up in order to get there. And if you're not willing to give up, we're just going to be on the B side for the rest of our careers. And
You
yes,
used the term earlier, wearing the mask, and I'm
yes,
guessing that is an integral part of it.
it is. And unfortunately, those who wear the mask forget to take it off.
Mm.
They continuously keep this facade of, oh, no one sees color. My boss is amazing. He gave me a $10,000 raise, but when you quit, they bring in a white boy for 35 or $40,000 more. So it's just like they're pacified, and so they keep that mask on and continuously keep us in our, and when I say us, Black people, in our places under them or around them in order to keep the white man happy.
Wow, pretty heavy. So, hopefully, Black women who lean more towards blocking the entrance of other Black people, do you feel that they are being selected to maintain an appearance of fairness or equity in hiring while purposely discouraging it in reality? Or is it just sort of a side effect that once they get into the positions, they get comfortable, which is markedly different from actively blocking?
I think it's both. You can be an active participant, or you're willing to turn a blind eye because you got yours. And then there's us, who's like, okay, the white guy came in with a degree from Harvard. The black woman came in from a degree from Howard. They both end up with the same degree and the same concept. But we have a sister here that came in the interview with a natural hair who may not speak as eloquently as the Harvard graduate, but she hits the mark every time. I'm personally going for the sister. But our my counterpart, another black woman, probably on the same level as I am or even higher, will feel that nagging thing in the back of her head. It's just something about her. I didn't like her. You seen how she came in with her hair? What was wrong with her hair? And she was wearing hoop earrings. What's wrong with her hoop earrings? Well, I just feel that he's from Harvard and he's going to do better. And then it's like a tug of war. So, where some of us are willing to give each other that leg up or that understanding, we have others that as soon as we walk through the door, it's already three strikes against us. Black woman name.
The sad thing about situations like that is that there are also those who will block not because of a perceived imperfection on the part of the Black candidate, but because they themselves, as you mentioned, don't take off the mask and they
Absolutely.
feel that they should be gatekeepers, and
Yes.
they take a lot of pride in being able to say, I'm the only one. Like the message never got through that there is strength in numbers. So they actually
Right.
feel proud to be able to say, I'm the first Black person, so and so. I'm the first Black person and only Black person to have accomplished A, B, and C.
Mm-hmm.
That should that
Absolutely.
should be a lonely position.
And it's sad because, like, when they're accustomed to the mask, they're accustomed to this power, they're accustomed to thinking that the white man handouts are what their fringe benefits are. Then they want to keep everyone else away because they're already getting scraps in the first place.
And somehow trained to believe that there isn't enough at the table for all of us.
Absolutely. And they're not even at the table, they're getting their food on the floor next to it. But because they're
Okay,
in the same room, this is what they feel.
so so do you feel, and I think I already know what you're going to say, but do you feel that some of us are chosen as HR representatives as a means of dealing with challenging situations? So, in other words, are Black people, Black women in particular, put there to do the dirty work and clean up corporate leaders' messes while allowing them to say that there is representation of Black people at the table?
Yes, I mean, we're always the one. We're the help. Period. That the movie had nothing on what corporate America treats us as. And we speak their lingo. You'll understand more where she's coming from. And in my prior life, it was literally to the point where some of my white leadership was afraid to even reprimand their black employees for fear of being attacked with no history of violence, no history of raising their voices. But they felt that these black women and men are they were just relentless in going to be attacked and a threat. It's amazing on you coaching somebody on their performance can turn into an on full blown white woman attack, panic attack. So yes, we are there to keep the peace, to clean up the messes, to be a translator from how the white person feels to what the business part of it can be to clean up their mess.
That sounds like it's extra work in the job description because you could end up needing combat pay with having to deal with cleaning up those challenging situations. If you're expected to be the bridge between two worlds, but being given credit in neither, that
Mm-hmm.
is added pressure on the representative.
I've always been told when I was in that world that HR is a thankless job. So you will have to accept the fact that no one would like you or trust you.
And double that if you're black, and add
Oh,
more
of
points on
course.
if you're a woman.
Oh my goodness. I've eaten many lunches in my past life by myself, in my car, or with my boss.
Oh, wow. Terrible.
Hmm.
Particularly if a lot of those situations arise because of their projecting onto the employee what they think the reaction is going to be.
Correct. In the early stages of my HR career, I had to learn how to maneuver. And the longer I stayed into the field, the better I got into being more proactive when it came down to a white supervisor coming to me about a black employee. And this is what I said earlier about learning the concept of their job functions, trying to understand your customer as a whole. Because when they come to you about an issue that happened in 2019 and they wrote them up in 2020 and now they want to fire them in 2021 with no further understanding, instead of saying yes, of course we can create the narrative. I've started at that time and in that later on in that career, just saying, okay, well, please send me the documentation, please help me understand where you're coming from. And when a black woman starts questioning the white C suite or white leadership, then all of a sudden it came that I had favorites and I was defending the black employees. And with that, of course, I still stuck it out and stayed in the job function. But you understand at that time, and I look at back at it now, that it's a test. Like, are you willing to keep that mask on to get a sister or brother fired because you don't want to ask the hard questions? And I started asking the hard questions.
So that leads to more areas in which you have to navigate. So when employees are subjected to difficult management, and that is a difficult position to put an employee in when you want to evaluate them on some incident that happened today, but you wait too long to review and correct the situation, then in your opinion, what suggestions do you offer them to help them manage what can easily become a very toxic work culture?
When it comes down to the black employees, what
Yes.
I have learned and what I have done is, because white people don't like difficult conversations, they're so quick to pass it off on HR. Oh, because HR said so, or HR does this. So I started, and I don't even feel sorry for this. I said, well, you know what? Give me the information and I'll talk to the employee for you. And with those one-on-one conversations, I'll come to the employee and I'm like, so I heard that this is going on. What's going on with this? And because it's us, and I automatically says, I'm not sure what happened, but let me know what's going on and we can work this out together. And if this continues, I'm going to give you this information to submit a formal complaint against your supervisor. And in my head, that complaint can trigger everyone to freeze. It stops the white person from wanting to be the bad guy, because now you're about to be investigated by a outside entity or even HR. So there were little tactics in that manner where I had to be that bridge, but it doesn't mean it was the bridge from one side to the next. It could be the other side, from the employee side to the supervisor, because dealing with toxic culture, difficult leadership can lead to turnover. And if you have seasoned employees that's been there for 5, 7, 10 years, and all of a sudden there's a huge exodus, you have to start looking at the leadership team. Like, what are you doing? What are your expectations? What happened? And of course, in that life, I didn't have any friends because not only was I not going to allow the supervisor or the manager to make it difficult for that employee, I was giving that employee the intel and the outlook on, okay, if they're going this way with you, and if you don't feel like they're listening to you, stop the conversation. I feel like we need to talk to HR. This needs to be a mediation. And that stops the conversation, and it makes the supervisor and manager think about, do I really want to have two black women in the room with me telling me that I'm doing something wrong, or two black people in a room with me telling me I'm doing something wrong and I don't have control over one of them? So it works in that way where if you need to be an effective business partner, you have to understand both customers, because yes, we do have difficult employees. We've had difficult employees. But then there are some supervisors and managers that aren't leaders. They should not be managing people, they should be managing processes. And you have to come to terms with both of that and being able to understand what's going on both ends.
Constant change. So
Yes.
if companies that survive and in fact thrive are those that are best able to deal with change from the outside and change from the inside. And of course, toxicity inside makes the role of everybody that much more difficult.
Mm-hmm.
So, based on that, the role of the HR representative has had to evolve from more of an office manager to an actual business partner. So, why do you think this change has come about?
Um, because the generations between the baby boomers, the Gen Xers, the millennials, the Generation X's, Generation Y, um, there's a more captivating situation that we're dealing with now. Everyone hates working with millennials. I love working with millennials. I loved working with millennials and Gen Xers and baby boomers. Baby boomers was the generation that sat and grinned and bare it. You know, leadership ate their young, so everyone understood that if someone was tough as nails, that you were going to turn out to be a good worker. And just the new generation is like, absolutely not. I am not going to let you stress me out. I am not going to sit through this type of toxicity. And that evolvement from the 80s to the 90s to the 2000s and now the 220s, as an HR business partner, if you continuously just keep status quo on, this is how it's going to be, this is how it's going to go, and you're against policy and this is where we're going to fire you, you're going to have a very small pool of employees and no one will want to work for your company. There are so many reviews at, Glassdoor, Indeed, and company reviews on bad leadership, bad employers. And it's gotten to the point now that if you don't evolve as an HR business partner to understand who you're dealing with on a regular basis, then you are just dead in the water. You will not be successful in that role, and you will keep that company stagnant.
I have to say, I'm really proud of the younger generations
Yes.
for looking at the example of what the baby boomers went through. Baby
Mm-hmm.
boomers stressed loyalty to the company. You
Mm-hmm.
stay there for 35, 40, 50 years and get your gold watch, but you also got a pension at the end of
Mm-hmm.
that. Younger generations saw pensions become a thing of the past. So, with all of those benefits gone, there was less of an incentive for them to stick with the old work yourself to death and stay loyal to one company that proves increasingly less loyal to them.
Correct.
So, I really think that it's a great change for the younger people to say that they need to evaluate exactly where they stand before they make the commitment to be completely loyal to entities that show less willingness to evolve and accommodate the fact that they don't want to die for the job.
Correct. And I admire that also. And like I said, it changed the whole perspective of HR. When, now the titles are changing, employee relation are evolving or being handled in a different manner than what it was from the 10-year perspective. I was in HR, from sitting down and receiving a write up and going about your business to do better, to no, you need to show me what's the reason for this write up, or to no, if I'm getting rid of, we need to look at the supervisor because three other employees quit before they sat down and wrote me up. So either I'm overworked and I'm underperforming, or I'm doing my job and I refuse to do other jobs because they have a high turnover. There are so many different perspectives when it comes down to coaching and counseling, to communication, to training, that now we're dealing with people that learn differently. Before, there was always just, this is what you do, this is how you learn, boom. Now it's, did you understand it? What else can we do to assist you? Is there anything else you have? Do you have any learning disabilities or any other disabilities like hearing impairment that we can make sure the training is catered to what you need? So it's a different time, and we as HR business partners, when I was then and whoever is currently a HR business partner, need to understand.
I think that it's really good that it's a different time because, contrary to what some people think and say, that people who are working in companies now, the younger people, are quote unquote softer and need to
Mm,
have their hands held more. I think it is really just a natural state of evolution for companies to want to that want to survive and thrive. They have to push for real diversity and inclusion. And that means
absolutely.
not just in terms of racial, but as you mentioned, um, different learning styles as well. Everybody can contribute in different ways to the corporation's goals. So,
Correct.
but despite this push for diversity and inclusion, much of corporate America's landscape is still very white and very male, especially in management positions. Do you think the voices of Black women who are in human resources management positions actually are not just being heard, but are followed?
There is a there is a reckoning, and it's going to slowly but surely happen. White men in corporate America are showing their hands, and we're holding them accountable. Right now, some of us are being heard, some of us are being followed. It depends on where you are. Like I said before, I've had women mentors, a male mentor, and I was truly blessed in that lifetime to run into people that cultivated me to be an extremely effective HR business partner. But there are just so many small numbers that I've seen that will listen to HR, that will listen to the Black women in these key roles to improve the business. And until, and this is just as realistic as we're going to be, Brooklyn, until there are no white men in charge, then I don't think we'll ever be truly heard.
So, how do you make a difference in a world that does not hear you? In dealing with sisters in the corporate world, how do you handle those relationships? Is it an automatic competition, or do you approach them as kindred spirits?
Like every relationship that you go through, there's a vetting period. Even though skin folk is not always your kinfolk. And when you're dealing in the corporate world, what I have learned is some Black women will take you under their wing, and they will absolutely be that partner no matter what department you're in. And then you have the other Black women that don't know when to take the mask off, or some that utilize the sister relationship as a as only transactional. And in doing so, I will always let everyone, all of us, all Black women know that, it's not always a competition. You can be that bigger person to sit down with her, to learn her job function, to see if she's open to, being a partner business wise as well as kindred spirits. And then those who you don't feel easy with, or who has shown that they are not interested in anyone but themselves, you have to keep them at bay. You can't always embrace everybody, and that's even on the outside of life.
So we've talked about skin folk, but many of us have heard of instances where non-Black people in human resources have thwarted Black candidates' chances at even getting a shot in an interview, let alone hired, based solely on their prejudiced perceptions about Black people in general. Have you
Hmm.
ever mitigated this kind of bias and been a conduit for Black people who are highly qualified but might otherwise be overlooked?
Absolutely. Like I said before, in my HR life, the earlier part of me, I absolutely learned how white people thought, how other people of color thought about us. And my hypothesis is we walk in with three strikes against us, no matter who is interviewing us, unless it's us. So, in mitigating that situation, I have to look at, is this person willing to learn if they come in with at least the main job qualifications? Can I assist in cultivating the conversation to improve the thought process of my white counterparts? And I have to say, later on in my career, I'm able to do that because at the beginning, they were just looking at me as a prompt in the room to make sure that the interviewing panel was diverse. And the more and more I cultivated and understood my white counterparts, I was able to cultivate the conversation into leaning towards the Black candidates, especially if they were highly qualified.
Interesting. So making sure that those who might otherwise be overlooked get to become those people who could prospectively get a seat at the table. That's the
Yes,
way you
and
start to build the inclusion, real diversity, and hopefully equity.
absolutely. And then after you have that whole conversation on why this person deserves the job, then the argument starts, and or not the argument, then my path starts on why are you bringing them at a lower salary? Because you wouldn't have done that for Rachel's cousin that we were trying to bring in that was on the same interview panel. So there are so many steps onto bringing on one of us when the white panel participants feel that, it's just something about that person. I'm not sure. It's in the back of it's itching on the back of my neck. I'm not sure, Keith, if we could bring this person on. And you're thinking in your head, what do you mean? They interviewed fine. Bringing someone on that's a Black person, and I've already mitigated through the interview process to bring this person on. Then you have to mitigate to deal with the salary expectations, because not only do we have a Black candidate, besides that, they're highly qualified. That means that they meet the educational, the job description, all the functions needed to be successful in this job. And my white counterparts will always lowball them, feeling that, well, this is their first time. We're going to give them the entry level, knowing that the budget shows that the range is always allocated between the highest and the lowest for that position, because we never know if we have to replace them every year. So you argue with the salary. I finally get the salary to where it's at a good light. And then once they come in, I'll the white supervisor, it's already against this person because you're not the person they wanted. So now I have to keep an eye on the employee and the supervisor to ensure that there are no write-ups or coaching and counseling is taking place that's out of hand. So in doing that, and to be effective as a Black woman in my role, I have to be cognitive of everything that's going on with the problem children and the leadership team, if that makes sense.
Yes, it does. Once again, you've increased the role of HR in terms of making it clear that one of your responsibilities is to manage people who may sabotage incoming employees simply because that person was not their first choice and may also be getting paid more than they think that person deserves.
And it solely is not their first choice, Brooklyn. It's their white choice.
And yet, people wonder why there's a problem with diversity. People tend to pick those who look like them, and
Absolutely.
referrals in corporate America often come from people who are within the company reaching out to their friends or their friends' friends.
Absolutely.
And if your circle of friends and colleagues is not diverse, then the people who you recommend for positions will likely lack the same diversity.
Hmm. I agree.
So, with all of those things that keep getting piled into the job description for HR representatives, whether they are official or unofficial in capacity, are there any pearls of wisdoms that you can impart to someone who is just getting started in this field?
As we started out with this conversation, to be effective, you need to know your state and federal laws. You need to understand company policy, and you have to have some form of emotional intelligence. Because if you turn a blind eye to some employee that's always angry, but they're in there doing their jobs successfully, that angry employee is around other employees who are not angry, or that supervisor that just got the position because they know the job, they're a subject matter expert in that personal job function, but not so much as a leader. You have to understand how you can assist this new supervisor in becoming a better leader. So those are the 3 points. And be available and be mobile. When there is a meeting, when it comes down to departments, sit down in it. Understand your customer. Understand all customers, be it the ones that's above you, the leadership team, being your counterparts, as well as your employees, your hires. If you don't understand the purpose of these departments, then you're not being an effective business partner. And those are
Well, I
my little
thank you for
nuggets.
taking it back to the beginning of the interview because I think it's really important that, particularly those who are in school studying the field, know what someone who has been a longstanding professional in the field emphasizes as the most important aspects of the job.
Thank you. And it's important that as Black women, you understand, because just because you have in your mind, you have a seat to the table, that doesn't mean that that's the table you need to be sitting at. Cultivate your own table. Understand the leadership that looks like you. If they shine, you shine. Because understand that there are circumstances behind those white faces that already put us behind the black wall. So don't ever think that you're a partner. You're a tool, and you have to act accordingly. So
Powerful
stay,
words to remember.
exactly. They have to stay true to themselves.
I think that will save so many listeners a lot of headaches and heartaches if they remember those key words. Just stay true to yourself.
Absolutely.
Well, I would like to thank you so much for taking time out of your day to participate in this interview. And as for our audience, this is eTalk Radio, and you have been listening to Black Experiences in Corporate America. We're going to leave room in the comments section for you all to ask questions. So thank you and good day.